All right, we're good.
We now call the meeting of the Technical Coordinating Committee to order. Please give your attention to this short video.
Due to COVID-19, this meeting will be conducted as a Zoom meeting pursuant to the provisions of the Governor's Executive Order N-2920, which suspends certain requirements of the Brown Act. This meeting is being live-streamed on the CCTA website. The chair will call upon members, staff, and other speakers by name. Please speak clearly and state your name before giving comments or remarks. Persons participating via Zoom with their cameras enabled are reminded that their activities are visible to viewers. Members participating by Zoom wishing to speak should physically raise their hand and mute their mic when called upon. Members should remute their mics when speaking. Citizens participating by Zoom wishing to speak should use the raise upon them at the appropriate time. Citizens will have 3 minutes to speak. A 30-second warning will be provided. After 3 minutes, staff will lower. Participants via phone will be called upon by the last 4 digits of their phone number. It is requested that such information is voluntary. Written public comments received in accordance with the COVID-19 special notice are printed on the meeting agenda. If authors of the written correspondence would like to speak, they raise their hand and the chair will call upon them at the appropriate time. All written correspondence received after that a roll call vote will be taken for all actions.
Christina, please take roll call.
Okay, Member Anderson? Not here. Member Bollinger? Member Bobadilla? Member Chen?
Yeah.
Member Conradi?
I'm here.
Thank you. Member Diaz?
Here.
Member Dillard?
Here.
Member Fahey?
I'm here. Can you confirm that that video was very, very warbly, or was that me?
Wait, what happened?
It wasn't you, Jerry.
What happened?
Thank you, Matt.
It didn't play cleanly straight through.
Oh,
It was
weird.
just choppy. Yeah, it's okay.
Okay.
You can read it.
Member Greenblatt?
Here.
Member Kersavan?
Present.
Member Mercurio?
Here.
I thought being heard. Yes. Member Moreno? Member Nelson? Member Ortiz?
Here.
Oh, thank you. Member Parikh? Member Reeves?
Here.
Oh, thank you. Member Rawani? Member Singh? Member Smith?
Here.
Thank you. Member Wang? Vice Chair Stamps? And Chair Wells?
Here.
Thank you.
So the next item on the agenda is public comment. Christina, have we received any public comment?
We have not.
Okay, is there anyone wishing to speak during public comment on an item that is not part of the agenda? If so, please raise your hand and I or staff will call upon you.
And I see no hands raised.
So the next item on the agenda is the consent calendar. Are there any changes, comments, etc. from the committee? Does anyone want to pull an item? Are there any public comment? If so, please raise your hand and I or staff will call on you.
I see no hands raised for public comment.
So due to the size of the technical coordinating committee, we will handle a motion and roll call after the last regular agenda item is presented. The next item on the agenda is an informational item on project monitoring. Stephanie, who will present this item?
Thanks, Chair Wells. Again, yeah, this is an informational item for project monitoring. So the packet includes the regular monitoring reports for STIP, OBAG, the Active Transportation Program, HBP, and HZIP, and the inactive projects list. So for your attention, is on the pages 39 to 40, which are the PDF, are tables of the OBAG projects. The two tables are for the current fiscal year or federal fiscal year of 2021 and 21-22. The obligation deadline for the 2021 programming year has already passed, but there are still a couple of projects that still need to receive obligation. They just have kind of come across a couple of unforeseen situations. That's why the delay. And staff is continuing to monitoring, working with them to hopefully program or obligate their funds before September 30th to make it into this fiscal year, or not. If not, then we'll work with the sponsored with MTC to move out their projects. And then for the fiscal year 21-22 projects that are on the list, staff will be working closely with them in the next few weeks to assist the process, MTC's process to add their projects in the annual obligation plan, which guarantees their funding for the next fiscal year, given that they submit their request for authorization before 12 or December 1 and receive the E76 before January 31st. So staff will be working with these project sponsors to get their projects on the annual application plan. And then just to turn your attention also for the projects that are on the plan, to make sure that field review is at least scheduled already to get the projects on the application plan. That's a measurement of readiness from MTC. And then just also lastly, wanted to point your attention to the inactive list on pages 47 to 48 of the packet. This month's list is considerably shorter than last time, so thank you for invoicing regularly. Just even more so important as we work on the obligation plan, because MTC checks it to make sure project sponsors are delivering their projects on time and meeting all their milestone dates, as well as the upcoming OBAG 3 that will be coming up in the next half a year or so. So just please continue to update your projects and invoice regularly, and to avoid being on the active list. So yeah, that concludes my presentation. Please let me know if you guys have any questions or comments.
Are there any committee comments? Are there any public comments? If so, please raise your hand and I or staff will call on you.
I see no hands raised for public comment.
So the next item on the agenda is an update on the BiCounty activity-based travel demand model development and request for volunteers to serve on the technical working group to develop the BiCounty activity-based travel demand model. Matt Kelly will present this item.
Yeah, that was a mouthful. Thank you, Chair Wells. Good afternoon, TCC members, Matt Kelly with CCTA, talking about I'm here for two reasons. One, to give you an update on where we're at with our model update, and then a request associated with that. You may remember it's been since 2019. In 2019, we came to you with a scope of our model update. And even before that, in 2017, we came to you with a model evaluation study where we, as you may know, every 10 years, we completely overhaul our travel demand forecasting model. So ahead of our 2020 update, we did a evaluation study where we looked at all the possible options for updating our model. And in light of the fact that MTC was moving to a new type of model and we would be kind of left in the dust, we stayed with our current modeling tools. So the decision that you all approved, we used our technical modeling working group at the time as a group that focused on the evaluation study, and then you supported their recommendation, which was to adopt MTC's travel model and refine it for Contra Costa. But also a twist on that was that we decided to, we proposed teaming with Alameda CTC, our partner agency to the south, and come up with a BiCounty model. So basically, the two agencies would combine forces, combine our funds and consultant resources, and take MTC's model, refine it for our two counties, and use it for our own needs. We figure we're going to be saving probably between the two counties, probably close to $500,000 per county on the actual model development costs. So you all were fine with that decision in 2019. You approved us going out for RFP. We finally did that in late 2020. There were some delays because of MTC's actual model development schedule. So now we're in, what month are we in? July 2021. We went and got a consultant team on board earlier this year. In March, we retained WSP. There's only really two consultants out there that do activity-based models, and that's what this new type of model system is that we're adopting from MTC. Both of those consultants proposed on the project. We went with WSP. They have a really good team. They have Kittleson as a sub-consultant who most of you are used to working with if you work with our model. They brought in some former Bay Area modelers, including the former modeler at MTC, Dave Worry, as part of the team. So we think it's a really good team. We just started working in May on the update. The first task will be actually getting MTC's model and opening up the hood. It's kind of a black box. And the first step is to find out what's in there, make sure we understand how it works, and then start making the consultant team will start making some recommendations on how to move forward. And then there's tasks like calibration and validation. So we'll be collecting data, current data, and using that to calibrate the model. We are starting with a 2015 base year, which is what MTC's model rests on, but we will also be doing a 2020 second base year that we will be using 2019 data for. So we're not looking at pandemic conditions. We're looking at pre-pandemic conditions for our 2020 base year. I have this. This was supposed to be further down in my presentation, but we will be making a request to local agencies for to get as much 2019 data as you all have, especially on the transit side and any traffic counts, things like that. So that's in the staff report. That'll be a request that'll come either from myself or the consultants probably in the coming months. So we'll be looking, like I said, for transit ridership, land use data, traffic data, things like that. The model will have lots of bells and whistles that we're not currently used to. Activity-based models track every single trip. So when I leave the house, well, when I used to leave the house and maybe stop for coffee, you know, before I jumped on BART and then went to work and then walked across the street at lunch to a restaurant and then, you know, took another coffee break at 3:30 and then went home on BART. All those individual trips would be tracked in the model as opposed to now where it just kind of tracks us to work and to home and then any separate trips we make from home, but not all the in-between trips. So the model is going to do a lot better tracking of the trips that we take on all modes. It's going to be able to look at TNCs. It's going to look at autonomous vehicles. It's in a future phase that MTC is working on right now, we'll have a transit crowding component. That's mostly used in San Francisco and kind of the core area, but when the transit vehicles start crowding, we'll be able to look at that as well. So that's about it on the model update, where we're at, because we really just started. But the first things we're going to need are data. And then one of our first tasks is putting together a technical working group. So some of you may be familiar with the technical modeling working group that we've had here in Contra Costa that is a subcommittee of TCC. They've always overseen our countywide model development. But actually that committee is kind of dwindled over the years. I think Steve Kursavan is probably the only person in the room that's had any involvement with them over the years. So for this effort, we've proposed having a BiCounty technical working group for this and a couple of members representing each county. We're also going to have, we also are hoping to have BART on the panel. We've actually already reached out to Andrew Tang, Ricky, to have him serve on the technical working group. We're reaching out to Caltrans separately and AC Transit and maybe some others at the regional level. But we did want local representation. So today I'm here to request some volunteers that would want to be involved in the development of this and guide the development. We're not asking for anyone to be model experts, but we would ask you to be looking at various deliverables and memos over the course of the development and just weigh in if there's anything you have concerns with, you know, regarding the land use or the model network or any of the components we're working on. The stuff we give to you, we hope would be easily digestible and not, you know, kind of very detailed modeling stuff. The consultants know that I'm not a modeler. My counterpart, Kristen Villanueva at ACTC is not a modeler. So things that are coming out, deliverables coming from the consultants are expected to be, you know, kind of easily digestible to non-modelers. So we're looking for anybody that has transportation planning experience, transportation engineering experience, or modeling experience that may want to volunteer on this. We think there's a schedule in your staff report. It shows the project going through the end of 2022. It may go a little bit into 2023. We think there will be a maximum of 6 meetings, roughly quarterly, over that time for the TWG. And I will say that Jamar Stamps, your vice chair, reached out to me the other day, and he is interested. So he's taking some pressure off of you. So we do have a county level representative, which I think is great. John Cunningham previously served on the technical modeling working group, and he'd always been very good input there at the county level. So, so I think we can pencil in Jamar, but we'd certainly be interested in anybody else. And I'd like to widen it beyond this committee. And if there's any folks that you guys work with at your agencies who you think might be interested, please, get their names to me and I can reach out to them. Or if you want to, have them reach out directly to me, either way, I'd be happy to talk them through it. I know modeling is not everybody's cup of tea, but I think people will find this model interesting and how different it is from the way we currently model. So I'll leave it at that and open it up for any questions. And yeah.
Matt, this is, I'm sorry.
So do we have, I guess at this point, we need 2 more volunteers, correct?
We don't need 3, but we'd like a maximum of 3. I think 2 would be a great number, but 3 would be awesome. And, if Jamar's the only rep, I guess we'll go with that. But I think maybe having someone on the engineering side or something like that, maybe representing transit or local or even a transit. Well, we're going to have Bart on the committee, but if any of the local transit agencies want to volunteer or anybody from the local agency on the engineering side, I think that would round out our Contra Costa side of things. But like I said, I don't need a volunteer today. I will take them over the next few weeks. We plan to convene the group in September, so we could get something between now and mid to end of August. That'd be great.
Okay, so are there any other committee comments?
I don't see any hands raised.
Are there any public comments? If so, please raise your hand and I or staff will call on you.
I see no hands raised for public comment.
Okay, do we have any volunteers?
I'm going to reach out to some folks in Walnut Creek. And my question was answered by Matt's answer to your question, so that's why I didn't say anything just a minute ago.
Okay, Jim?
Thanks, Andy.
Remember,
I'd be willing to volunteer to serve.
Jim, your name actually came up in an email today between Kristen and myself, so I think we're going to shoot an email out to you shortly.
Okay,
But so thank you.
you're welcome.
okay, so due to the size of the technical coordinating committee, we will handle a motion and roll call vote after the last regular agenda item has been presented. The next item on the agenda is the 2022 State Transportation Improvement Program, and Hisham Noemi will present this.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I hope you can hear me and see my presentation. Okay, great. Thank you. So I don't know why I'm seeing 2 screens in one on the first one. Okay, so let me know if you can't hear me, raise your hand or something. Before we dive into the 2022 step, I wanted just to take a couple minutes to give you an update on where we are on the allocation plan and also the allocation policy that the board adopted a few months ago. Today, we'll be asking for your approval for the staff recommendation to program the funding from the 2022 STIP. So starting with the allocation plan, as you recall, the board approved the allocation plan February 2021, and the reason why we had to do an allocation plan is we were worried that our revenues will decline beyond what we assumed in the 2019 strategic plan. So we looked at all the remaining projects in Measure J, as well as in the TLC and the PITY program. And then we scored them and ranked them based on the criteria that was approved by the board, which basically put a higher priority on projects that have other fund sources and can be shovel-ready and delivered sooner than later. So in total, there were 32 locally sponsored Measure J projects that were remaining. They needed about $43 million in Measure J funds. And we also looked at the authority-sponsored Measure J projects. We were working on 11 projects, and we put them in priority order based on different criteria, such as the size of the shortfall, as well as deliverability and other factors. At the same meeting in February, basically the board, in order to protect the funding, the state and federal funding on that the local sponsors secured for their Measure J projects, the board authorized resuming appropriations to the top 14 locally sponsored projects. We're still in a suspension mode for the remaining projects on the allocation plan. And just to remind you, these are the top 14 projects that the board basically authorized resumption of appropriation to them. We received few requests so far, and I think 4 or 5 of these projects have already received their appropriation. We're still waiting for the remaining, for the sponsors of the remaining projects to come in with their requests for appropriation. So if you have a project on this list, try to come in and get your appropriation as soon as possible. These projects, this is the rest of the list, this slide and the one after that I'm going to show. These have not been approved yet to receive their Measure J appropriation. But you can see we highlighted a few of them in light green. What that means, these projects we managed working with the project sponsors to actually find them other type of money to keep them moving. So the ones in green basically will be receiving their funding from the Quick Strike program or OBAC savings. I just want to say thank you for those sponsors who were willing to work with us on this. To the extent we fund these projects from other sources, we basically are freeing up Measure J to make sure we have enough to do the rest of the projects. So the list goes on onto this slide as well. So after you take those projects highlighted in green into account, we still need $24 million in Measure J to appropriate to the remaining projects on this list. This is the list of the authority-managed projects. What tops the list is the 684 interchange phase 1, 2A, as well as the northbound 680 express lane projects. And all of these projects have funding shortfalls. So we will always be competing for funding for these projects until they get fully funded. In terms of the allocation policy that was adopted by the board, basically tried to accomplish 3 things. One, establish a process to update the allocation plan and the projects lists on this allocation plan. Also, it established a process to program future fund sources. You probably heard me say before, if we cannot fund these projects with Measure J, these projects become our priority to fund from wherever other sources we control, like the STIP or OBAG. So this policy basically puts that onto paper. And then it outlines the development of the fund exchange reserve and the eligible uses for that reserve. So I'll go through them one by one. In terms of the updates to the allocation plan, basically we promised the board we're gonna give them an update on where we are with the allocation plan at least twice a year. So the next update most likely will be in the fall of this year once we have the revenue forecast. And every time we do an appropriation to a project, we will always attach a status update on the allocation plan to that resolution. So the board is aware which projects are moving forward. In terms of programming future funding, such as the 2020 step, 2022 step, the board basically said that the projects in the allocation plan, if they don't receive their Measure J, they will be our priority to fund from the future fund sources. We made a commitment to them and we want to meet it. So every time there is a new fund source, such as the 2022 step, we will basically look at the projects on the list, contact the project sponsors to see if they're interested in applying for that fund source. And as you know, each fund source will have their own requirement. For example, the STIP, it's federal money, so the sponsor will have to do an EPA. Maybe they were not planning on doing that. So that's why we need to talk to them about it. We need to make sure that the schedule for the funded source works with the project schedule. So we'll basically evaluate all the projects, see if they're eligible or not, and then contact the sponsors to see if they're interested in submitting an application for that fund source. And because in most cases, the funding available is not sufficient to meet all the funding requests, we would have to rank those projects based on the fund source criteria. And then at that point, decide which projects gets funded. We will only go out for a new call for projects when basically the projects in the allocation plan are funded. And that's what we did with the Quick Strike program as well. In terms of the fund exchange reserve, this is to provide the authority with matching funds to do the authority managed projects, so we can compete for future state and federal sources. As you know, we have not managed yet to pass a new measure, and our Measure J funding that's available for projects is pretty much spent at this point. We have spent at least 85% of that money because of all the bonding that we did to accelerate them. So we're hurting for matching funds, and not having it really hurts our chances to secure other fund sources. So this is a way for us to allow us to continue to make progress on these projects, given that we don't have a new measure. So now with that as background, I want to talk about the 2022 step. As you know, every 2 years, basically the CTC adopts a new step cycle. The 2022 step adds 2 years to the 2020 step. So in this case, new funding will be added in fiscal year 26 and fiscal year 27. So the funding available through the step is not going to be available for another 5 years at the earliest. So the draft fund estimate was released by the CTC on June 23rd of last month. And it shows that we will have about $22 million in programming capacity after you take out what we owe to MTC and BART for past fund exchanges that we've done with them. We had to do these exchanges to keep the eBART project on schedule and to keep the Caldecott project on schedule. What happened basically when these projects went to ask for this their STIP funds. The STIP funding wasn't available because of state budget issues. So both MTC and BART, came through for us by basically using their own money in return for us programming STIP funds for them in the future. So we have $22.3 million available to us. And as you know, to program projects in the STIP, there are a bunch of requirements you have to meet. For example, you gotta do a PSR or a PSR equivalent and have it approved by November 1st of this year. You have, because this is federal money, you have to have NEPA clearance, and only projects that are asking for more than $500,000 will be eligible. When you ask for STIP funding for a specific phase or a specific project, basically the CTC assumes that phase will be fully funded with the request. And then, as I mentioned earlier, this money is not going to be available for another 5 to 6 years. So based on the criteria you see here, for example, the size of the request has to be more than 500. We looked at our allocation plan, all the projects in the allocation plan, and you can see none of these are requesting less than $500,000. All the ones that are asking for less were screened out. That means they were not eligible. So we looked at the list, we contacted the project sponsors, we asked them if they're interested in seeking STIP funding to submit an application for us by end of May. For various reasons, the sponsors decided not to apply for STIP funding. Many of them have had good reasons. For example, they their projects, they didn't want to federalize them. The NEPA process would have delayed the project. Many of them thought they were shovel ready now, and adding the STIP to the project will delay them by 5 to 6 years because that money is not going to be available until then. And also many of them hope that they'll still get their Measure J money. As you know, our revenue are coming in just slightly ahead of what we were projecting in the last strategic plan. So what we feared that we're going to have major revenue reduction is thankfully it's not materializing. So none of the sponsors applied. On the other hand, CCTA submitted 3 projects for evaluation. The I-680 Coordinated Adaptive RAM Metering, that's part of Innovate 680, the Advanced Technology Project. Also, we applied for the Northbound Express Lane on 680, as well as the interchange at 680 and 4. Just these 3 projects, they were asking a lot more than the available funding to us. So we knew we couldn't do them all, and that's why we had to rank them basically. And based on the ranking we've done, these are in ranking order. And the scoring criteria is what we used in past STIP cycle. We did not change that, as you can see in this slide. So today, what we're asking you to do is basically approve the staff recommendation, which is to program $25 million for the I-680 CARM, which is the top ranked project. And, I told you before that we have only $22.3 million, so we don't even have enough money in the STIP to fund it. So how can we recommend $25 million? Well, the STIP rules allow you to advance 1 year of the next STIP cycle. And that year has about 6.7 million. So we could advance up to 6.7 million. In this case, we only want to advance 2.7 to have enough funding for the top ranked project. And also we're working with MTC. Actually, you can see in the STIP fund estimate, let me go back. We owe them $31 million from the STIP cycle. So we are talking to them to see if we can delay repayment of some of this money, not all of it, to allow us to program some of that money on the northbound express lane. They haven't said yes yet, but they also haven't said no. So we are hopeful by the time we take this to our board in September that we could recommend programming some of that $31 million to the northbound express lane, and then MTC would take it back in the 2024 STIP cycle. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions. I just want to thank James, O'Brien, and Stephanie for working hard on evaluating the applications for these projects.
Are there any committee comments? Are there any public comments? If so, please raise your hand and I or staff will call on you.
I see no public comments.
So again, due to the size of the technical coordinating committee, we will handle a motion and roll call vote after the last regular agenda item has been presented.
Ricky, you're muted.
So that was actually the last regular agenda item. And now for a motion and roll call vote to approve the following items. We have item 3, approval of the consent calendar. Item 4B, approval to have up to 3 volunteers from the technical coordinating committee to serve on the BiCounty activity-based travel demand model technical working group. And right now, the 2 names that we do have are member Jamar Stamps and member Jim Conradi. And our third item is item 4C, and that is authorization to seek authority board approval to program $25 million for the Interstate 680 Coordinated Adaptive Ramp Metering Project and $890,000 for planning, programming, and monitoring in the 2022 STIP program improvement. The State Transportation Improvement Program. Do I have a motion? And the second?
Well, if nobody else will, I'll make a motion for the previously mentioned.
I have a first by member Andy Smith. Do I have a second?
Second by Andy, number 2.
And a second by member Andy Dillard. Christina, please conduct a roll call vote.
Yes, member Chen,
Aye.
member Conradi.
Right?
Sorry, guys. Member Diaz,
Aye.
member Dillard,
Aye.
member Fahey,
Aye.
member Greenblatt,
Aye.
member Kersavan,
Yes.
member Mercurio,
Aye.
member Ortiz,
Aye.
member Reeves,
Aye.
member Smith,
Yes.
Chair Wells.
Yes.
And did I get everybody present? I believe so. All right. All 3 of the items passed with members present.
Great. Do we have any other business? Well, with that being said, and
Actually, really
Oh,
quick,
sorry.
if I may suggest an item for perhaps a future meeting, and it doesn't have to be the next one, but we should start talking at some point about, are we going to return to in-person meetings or just keep them on Zoom like this? So just to kind of throw that out there for maybe a couple of months from now, as see where things are headed, but I don't know if anybody else.
Yeah, I think it's our board that's probably going to end up making that decision for us.
That and the Brown Act. Just to throw that out there.
Well,
So
never mind.
we're waiting for the rules and regulations of a hybrid meeting. And yeah, we can definitely add that to our agenda and touch base next month if you'd like.
I'm perfectly happy with just waiting to see what the bosses tell us, and then we'll click our heels.
And do we even have a meeting next month?
No, actually, we do not. Sorry.
Okay, do we have any other business? Okay, with no other business, the meeting is adjourned at 3:18 p.m.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.